The wedding hall went dead silent the second I stepped through those doors in my emerald gown, my billionaire husband's hand on my back, and I watched my sister Linda's face drain white as her bouquet hit the floor. 6 months ago, she'd thrown me out, called me an embarrassment, forged a letter to make it look like our dead parents disowned me for being poor. But what she didn't know, what none of these guests in their designer suits knew, was that I had the bank statements proving she stole my inheritance to pay for this exact wedding, and I was about to destroy her in front of everyone. Welcome back, my strong family and friend, to Mr. Crown Stories. If no one told you today, hear this: you are enough. You are worthy. You are the light that fights back. I make these stories for hearts like yours, hurt but not broken, hoping for a new day after hard times. If this touches you, click subscribe, say I am here, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I'll share another good story, and you don't want to miss it. Every word is for you, the one who faced pain and stood up. May your heart feel hope, your troubles get easier, and your spirit shine with a better tomorrow. Let's walk this road together, hand in hand, heart to heart. Now, let us begin. You thought I'd stay away? The words echoed through the grand hall as every guest turned, their gasps filling the air. I watched Linda's face pale, her groom frozen mid-step, clutching her bouquet like a lifeline. The air thickened with disbelief as I stood there, draped in a bold green gown that clung to me like a second skin, a stark contrast to the sea of ivory and gold surrounding Linda. Beside me loomed Albert Cruz, my billionaire husband, his presence a tower of quiet authority, his dark suit cutting through the opulence like a blade. The guests' eyes darted between us and Linda, their whispers a rising tide. 6 months ago, she'd cast me out, branding me an embarrassment unfit for her perfect wedding. Now here I was, rewriting her script with every step I took across the polished marble floor. I am Rebecca now, no longer the shadow she tried to bury. But before I unveil the storm that shattered her moment, hear this. If you've ever been deemed less because of your circumstances, if you've ever been shunned by those who should love you, if you've ever been told you'd never rise, this story is for you. The universe has a way of turning the tables with a precision that steals your breath. Tap that heart if you trust in redemption's sweet thrill, and stay with me, because this journey will leave you breathless. But let's go back to where it all started. When I was 25, living under Linda's envy in our fading estate, naive enough to think family could withstand her jealousy. The grand hall of the Sheeran estate had always been a monument to our family's past glory, its chandeliers casting a golden glow over walls lined with portraits of ancestors who'd built this legacy. Today, those walls bore witness to Linda's triumph. Cascading white flowers framed the altar where she stood, resplendent in a lace gown that shimmered with every calculated move. Her fiancé, James, a man of polished charm in his dark suit, held her arm, his smile a mirror of her ambition. The guests, a parade of wealth and status, murmured approval, oblivious to the storm I carried in my heart. 6 months ago, that storm had been a whisper. Linda had summoned me to the estate's drawing room, her lips pursed as she surveyed my worn coat and scuffed shoes. Rebecca, she'd said, her voice dripping with pity, this wedding is my fresh start. Your condition would only drag it down. You're not presentable. The word stung like a slap, her eyes cold as she handed me a forged letter, supposedly from our deceased parents, declaring me disowned for my financial state. I'd stared at the paper, my hands trembling, but I nodded, too broken to fight. She'd watched me leave, her relief palpable, convinced I'd fade into obscurity. After our parents' death 2 years prior, I'd been adrift. The modest inheritance meant for me vanished into Linda's grasp, leaving me to scrape by with odd jobs, waitressing, cleaning, anything to survive. While she mingled with elites, I scrubbed floors in dimly lit diners, my dreams of a better life buried under exhaustion. Linda thrived, her poise a shield against the whispers of our family's decline, her every success a reminder of my failure. She'd even sabotaged a job interview at Grayson & Company, a prestigious firm, spreading rumors of my unreliability to keep me beneath her. I believed her narrative, that I was the flawed sister, unworthy of the Sheeran name. But that rainy afternoon in the city changed everything. I'd collided with Albert Cruz, his umbrella shielding me from the downpour, his gaze holding a kindness I'd forgotten existed. A reclusive billionaire, he saw past my frayed coat to the resilience within. Our meetings grew from chance to intention, coffee, dinners, late-night talks about dreams I'd buried. 6 months ago, as Linda planned her wedding, Albert proposed, his ring a symbol of a life I'd never imagined. His wealth, once a rival Linda had tried to undermine, now elevated me to her equal, and beyond. Today, as I crossed the hall, the green gown, a gift from Albert, felt like armor. The fabric hugged my frame, its deep hue a defiance of Linda's ivory world. Albert's hand rested lightly on my back, his presence a silent promise. The guests' gasps grew louder, their eyes tracing the transformation they couldn't fathom. Linda's lace gown seemed to dim, her bouquet trembling in her grip as she registered my face. James's smile faltered, his hand tightening on her arm, unsure of the scene unfolding. "Rebecca." Linda's voice cracked, a whisper lost in the hall's echo. Her eyes darted to Albert, recognition flickering. His name had once been a thorn in her business dealings. The crowd parted, their murmurs a mix of shock and curiosity. I held her gaze, the weight of her banishment fueling my resolve. She'd thought me gone, a forgotten relic of her past. But I'd returned, not as the sister she discarded, but as the wife of a man whose influence dwarfed her own. The memories flooded back, nights spent crying over lost opportunities, days of hunger when rent loomed, the forged letter crumpling in my fist. Linda had built her wedding on my ruin, her stolen inheritance funding the flowers and crystal. Yet here I stood, a living testament to her miscalculation. Her shock was a mirror to my triumph, her perfect day teetering on the edge of collapse. As I neared the altar, Linda's lips parted, but no words came. The guests' stares bore into her, their whispers sharpening. I could feel the tension coiling, a confrontation brewing beneath the surface. Albert's steady presence anchored me, his eyes promising support. This was only the beginning. Her world was about to unravel, and I held the threads. The grand hall still buzzed with the aftermath of Rebecca's entrance, her green gown a defiant slash against the ivory decor, Albert Cruz's towering presence a silent threat. But as I, Linda Sheeran, stood frozen, bouquet trembling in my lace-clad hands, my mind spiraled back to the roots of this moment. I had built this day, every flower, every guest, every calculated smile, to erase the shadows of our family's decline. Yet here she was, my discarded sister, unraveling it all. The seeds of this envy had been sown long ago, buried deep where no one could see, until now. I was born to the Sheeran legacy, the golden child at 28, raised in the echoing halls of our estate where privilege was my birthright. Mother's pearls adorned my neck, father's approval shaped my every step, and the world saw me as the heir to a fading dynasty. Rebecca, 3 years younger, was the anomaly, her laughter too bright, her charm too effortless. Even as children, she drew eyes I craved. At 10, I'd won the school spelling bee, but it was Rebecca's clumsy applause that the teachers praised, her natural warmth outshining my triumph. I hated her for it, that unearned glow she carried like a crown I couldn't claim. As we grew, the rift widened. After our parents' death 2 years ago, I stepped into their shoes, managing what was left of our fortune with a precision Rebecca could never muster. She floundered, waitressing, cleaning, her threadbare existence a stain on the Sheeran name. Yet even then, her potential gnawed at me. I saw it in the way strangers smiled at her, in the resilience she hid behind tired eyes. I couldn't let her rise, not when I'd worked to polish our image into something pristine. So I acted. I spread rumors to Grayson and Company, whispering of her unreliability to sabotage a job interview she'd earned. I forged a letter from our parents, disowning her for her poverty, a lie to justify what I'd always felt, she didn't belong. The wedding band was my masterpiece. 6 months ago, I summoned her to the drawing room, her worn coat a mockery of my elegance. "Rebecca," I'd said, voice laced with pity, "this day is my fresh start. Your condition would only drag it down. You're not presentable." Her nod, her silent exit, was a victory. I'd isolated her, ensured she'd fade. I even pocketed the small inheritance meant for her, funneling it into the flowers and crystal that now adorned the hall. She was gone, or so I thought, her potential buried under my control. James, my fiancé, had questioned it. That morning, as we reviewed the guest list, his brow furrowed. "Linda, excluding your sister feels harsh. She's family." His dark suit clung to him, his charm a perfect match for my ambition, but his doubt irritated me. I leaned closer, my voice soft but firm. "James, she's unstable, erratic, unreliable. I've heard it from others. She'd disrupt everything." His hesitation melted under my gaze, his trust in me a tool I wielded with ease. He nodded, satisfied, and I turned back to the preparations, my plan secure. The hall filled with guests, elites in tailored gowns, their approval a balm to my pride. The lace of my gown shimmered, a symbol of my triumph over our family's past. But beneath the surface, envy simmered. Rebecca's move to the city gnawed at me. I'd heard whispers of her taking a low-paying clerical job, a step above her previous struggles. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a threat to the narrative I'd crafted. I convinced myself she'd fail, that her charm would wither in the grind. Yet a part of me feared she'd find a way, that her potential would bloom where I'd tried to stifle it. The day progressed, the ceremony nearing. James adjusted his tie, his smile returning as he took my hand. "You've outdone yourself, Linda," he murmured, and I basked in it, until the doors swung open. Rebecca's entrance, that green gown a slap to my ivory world, Albert Cruz at her side, shattered my composure. The guests' gasps echoed my shock. How had she risen? The question burned as I clutched the bouquet tighter, James's grip on my arm faltering. My mind raced back to the rumors I'd spread, the forged letter I'd hidden, the inheritance I'd stolen. Had she uncovered them? The thought tightened my chest. But then, a memory flickered, something I'd dismissed. A rainy afternoon 6 months ago, before the ban. I'd seen her from the estate's window, hurrying through the downpour, her coat soaked. A man in a dark suit had offered her an umbrella, tall, commanding, unfamiliar. I'd laughed it off, assuming it was charity. Now, seeing Albert, I wondered. Was that him? Had that chance meeting planted the seed of her rise? The hall's silence pressed against me, Rebecca's eyes locking with mine. Her presence was a mirror to my envy, her transformation a challenge to my control. James whispered, "Who is that?" But I couldn't answer, my throat dry. The guests' murmurs grew, their stares shifting from admiration to curiosity. I'd built this day to erase her, but she'd returned, a specter of the potential I'd feared. The confrontation loomed, a storm I'd sown now breaking over me. As she neared, the green of her gown seemed to pulse, Albert's steady gaze a silent ally. My plan had backfired, her poverty, her charm, her resilience had found a champion. The bouquet trembled in my hands, the lace of my gown suddenly heavy. This was only the beginning, and the seeds of my envy were about to bear a bitter harvest. The grand hall still pulsed with the shock of my return, the green of my gown a stark rebellion against Linda's ivory dominion, Albert Cruz's steady presence a fortress at my side. Her face, pale and fractured, clung to the bouquet as if it could shield her from the truth I carried. But as the guests' murmur swelled, my mind churned back to the moment I'd first grasped the depth of her betrayal, the forged letter that had severed us, a lie etched in ink to justify my banishment. It was a week after Linda's decree, the drawing room's heavy silence still ringing in my ears, that I found it. I'd returned to the estate to retrieve a few belongings, slipping into the attic where our parents' old trunks gathered dust. Amid faded photographs and yellowed letters, a crisp envelope caught my eye, addressed to me in a hand that mimicked Mother's elegant script. My heart quickened as I tore it open, expecting a final word of love. Instead, the word stabbed me, "Rebecca, your poverty disgraces us. You are no longer our daughter." The signature wavered, too perfect, too controlled. I knew Mother's hand, this was a forgery. Linda's doing. The realization hit like a physical blow, deepening the rift she'd carved. She'd used this lie to exile me, to paint me as the unworthy sister, a narrative she'd woven to protect her pristine image. I left the estate that day, the letter crumpling in my fist, and fled to the city. The transition was brutal. My low-paying clerical job at a cramped office barely covered a dingy apartment, its walls stained with the dreams of others. I scrubbed tables at a diner by night, my hands raw, my spirit fraying. The city was a grind, crowded buses, endless paperwork, the weight of Linda's rejection pressing down. Yet amid the struggle, a flicker of suspicion grew. The job interview at Grayson & Company, a prestigious firm I'd landed through sheer determination, had fallen apart inexplicably. Colleagues whispered of rumors, my unreliability, my instability, claims I'd never made. I dug deeper, calling a contact at the firm. "Someone spread lies," they said, hesitant. "Said you couldn't handle the pressure." The pieces clicked, Linda's hand, her jealousy reaching even here to sabotage my chance at stability. The betrayal fueled my resolve, but hope felt distant until Albert. That rainy afternoon, 6 months ago, replayed in my mind. I'd stumbled into him, my coat soaked, my spirit as drenched as the streets. His umbrella shielded me, his dark eyes holding a kindness that pierced my despair. "You look like you need this more than I do," he'd said, his voice low, steady. We talked, briefly at first, about the rain, the city. He was a billionaire, a name I'd barely recognized, his tech empire a world apart from my struggles. Yet he saw me, not the poverty Linda had branded me with. Our meetings grew, coffee at a quiet cafe, dinners where he listened, late nights where he encouraged my buried dreams. His kindness was a lifeline, each encounter stitching together the hope Linda had torn apart. Back at the estate, Linda reveled in her control. The wedding preparation swelled, cascading flowers, crystal chandeliers, every detail a testament to the inheritance she'd stolen. That modest sum, meant to ease my burdens after our parents' death, had vanished into her grasp. I'd overheard her once, on a rare visit before the ban, discussing floral arrangements with a planner. "Use the extra funds," she'd said, her tone casual, guilt buried beneath her poise. The money had funded her triumph, a silent theft that gnawed at me as I counted coins for rent. She hid it well, her smile a mask as she directed staff, her control a shield against the truth. My days in the city grew harder. The clerical job offered little reprieve, endless files, a supervisor's sharp tongue, the ache of standing for hours. The diner shifts left me exhausted, my tips barely covering food. Yet Albert's presence became a beacon. He'd appear unexpectedly, outside the office with a warm drink, at the diner with a quiet nod. "You've got strength in you," he'd said one night, his gaze steady. "Don't let anyone dim it." His words kindled something, hope, yes, but also anger. The forged letter, the sabotaged interview, the stolen inheritance, they were Linda's weapons, and I began to see them as clues to a larger truth. I started investigating. The letter's ink, too fresh for its supposed age, hinted at recent forgery. A call to a family friend confirmed my suspicions. Our parents had left equal shares, a fact Linda had buried. The Grayson rumors traced back to a source close to the Sheeran estate, too convenient to be coincidence. Each discovery stoked my determination. Linda thought me broken, but I was piecing myself together, Albert's support a foundation I hadn't known I needed. One evening, after a grueling shift, I sat in my apartment, the forged letter spread before me. The city's hum filtered through the cracked window, a reminder of my struggle. Albert had left hours ago, his latest visit ending with a promise to meet again. I traced the false signature, my fingers trembling. Linda's betrayal ran deep, deeper than I'd imagined. The ban, the rumors, the theft, they were threads of a web she'd spun to keep me down. But I wouldn't stay there. I vowed to uncover the full extent of her deceit, to confront her with the truth she'd buried. The wedding, her perfect day, would be the stage. The thought carried me back to the present. As I stood in the hall, Albert's hand a quiet strength at my back, Linda's eyes locked with mine. Her lace gown seemed to wilt, the bouquet a fragile shield. The guests' murmurs grew, their stares shifting from her to me. I could feel the weight of her lies, the forged letter a phantom in my pocket, the sabotaged interview a scar on my resolve. Albert's presence grounded me, his earlier words echoing, "You've got strength." Linda's guilt flickered in her gaze, her control slipping as the truth loomed closer. I stepped forward, the green gown a banner of my rise. The hall held its breath, the confrontation brewing beneath the surface. Linda's lips parted, but no defense came. The stolen inheritance, the forged betrayal, they were hers to answer for. And I would make her face them, every lie laid bare. This was my vow, my fight, and it began now. The grand hall still trembled with the weight of my return, the green of my gown a defiant flare against Linda's fading lace, Albert Cruz's steady presence a pillar at my side. Her eyes, wide with shock, clung to the bouquet as if it could hold back the truth I carried, the forged letter, the sabotaged interview, the stolen inheritance. But as the guests' murmurs swirled, my thoughts drifted to the resilience that had carried me here, a journey ignited by Albert's unexpected grace and shadowed by Linda's blind arrogance. 6 months ago, that rainy afternoon had been my turning point. Albert's umbrella had shielded me from the downpour, his dark eyes holding a warmth that pierced the chill of my despair. Our first conversation, brief about the rain and the city, had grown into something more. Coffee at a quiet cafe became a ritual, his questions about my dreams coaxing them from the ashes Linda had left. He was no ordinary man. His tech empire, Cruz Innovations, was a name I'd heard whispered in the city's boardrooms. Yet he saw me, Rebecca, the discarded sister, not the poverty Linda had branded me with. His kindness was a lifeline, each meeting a thread stitching my broken spirit back together. As our bond deepened, a twist emerged. Over dinner one night, Albert mentioned a past business rival, Linda Sheeran, who tried to undermine his early ventures with whispered deals and false leads. The irony stung. Her jealousy had once targeted him, and now her sister stood at his side. He laughed it off, but I felt the weight of it. Linda's efforts to crush his rise had failed, just as her banishment had failed to bury me. This connection fueled my determination, a quiet revenge simmering beneath our growing love. My life in the city began to shift. The clerical job, though modest, became a foothold. The cramped office with its flickering lights and endless files tested my endurance, but I thrived. I organized chaotic records, earned a supervisor's rare nod, and saved every penny. The diner shifts, scrubbing tables, dodging impatient customers, hardened my resolve. Each ache in my hands, each late-night bus ride, was a step toward reclaiming what Linda had stolen. I wasn't just surviving, I was rebuilding, my resilience a shield against her shadow. Meanwhile, Linda's world swelled with extravagance. The wedding preparations peaked. Cascading white flowers draped the estate, crystal chandeliers glittered like stars, and the guest list brimmed with elites. She moved through it all with a queen's poise, her lace gown a symbol of her triumph. The stolen inheritance funded the opulence, every petal a silent testament to her guilt. She remained oblivious to my rise, convinced I languished in poverty. James, her fiancé, adjusted his dark suit at her side, his charm a perfect match for her ambition, but even he seemed blind to the storm brewing beyond her control. Albert's presence grew constant. He'd meet me after shifts, a warm drink in hand, his quiet encouragement a contrast to the city's harshness. "You've got a fire in you," he'd said one evening, his gaze steady. "Don't let anyone extinguish it." His words kindled a hope I'd buried. 6 months after that rainy day, as autumn leaves fell outside my apartment, he took me to a rooftop overlooking the city. The skyline sparkled, a mirror to the life he offered. "Rebecca," he said, dropping to one knee, a ring gleaming in his hand, "I want you as my wife. Your strength inspires me." Tears stung my eyes as I nodded, the proposal transforming me from a struggling sister into Mrs. Cruz. His wealth, once a rival Linda had envied, now elevated me beyond her reach. Linda, ensconced in her wedding plans, heard nothing of this. She dismissed me as a memory, her letters to friends painting me as a lost cause. "Rebecca's still scraping by," she'd written to a cousin, her tone smug. Her ignorance was my advantage. The forged letter, the Grayson rumors, the inheritance theft, I'd gathered evidence, piecing together her deceit. A family friend confirmed the equal shares our parents had intended, a fact Linda had buried. A contact at Grayson traced the sabotage to a Sheeran source. Each discovery was a weapon, tucked away as I planned my return. The decision crystallized one night. I sat in my apartment, the green gown, Albert's gift, spread before me, its fabric a promise of my new identity. The forged letter lay on the table, its false signature a scar of Linda's betrayal. The evidence of her sabotage and theft filled a folder, a dossier of her lies. Albert's ring glinted on my finger, his support a quiet strength. The wedding invitation, sent out of formality and never meant for me, taunted from the counter. I traced its edge, my resolve hardening. Linda's perfect day would be her undoing. I would attend, armed with the truth, and watch her world crumble. The thought carried me back to the hall. As I stood before her, Albert's hand a steady anchor, Linda's shock deepened. Her lace gown seemed to wilt, the bouquet trembling as guests' stares shifted. "Rebecca," she whispered, her voice a crack in her facade. The irony of Albert's past with her fueled my resolve. Her rival had become my savior. The hall held its breath, the confrontation looming. I clutched the evidence, my heart pounding with the vow to expose her. This was my rise, and it would begin with her fall. The grand hall still reverberated with the shock of my presence, the green of my gown a bold defiance against Linda's wilting lace, Albert Cruz's steady hand a fortress at my side. Her eyes, wide with dread, gripped the bouquet as if it could shield her from the storm I brought. But as the guests' whispers thickened, my thoughts turned to a discovery that had ignited my fury, the bank statements proving Linda's theft of my inheritance, a betrayal that would fuel my reckoning. It was a week before the wedding, in the dim light of my city apartment, that I uncovered the truth. Albert had insisted I sort through old family documents he'd retrieved from a discreet contact, a favor from his vast network. Among them, a faded envelope revealed bank statements from the estate's account, dated just after our parents' death 2 years ago. The figures stunned me. My share, a modest but life-changing sum, had been transferred to Linda's name. Notes in the margin, in her precise handwriting, labeled it wedding funds. The realization hit like a thunderclap. She'd stolen my legacy, using it to build her perfect day while I scraped by. The forged letter, the sabotaged interview, the banishment, it all paled beside this theft. My resolve hardened, a fire stoked by the memory of her manipulation. After our parents' passing, Linda had taken charge with a predator's grace. I was 23, grieving, when she summoned me to the estate study. "Rebecca," she'd said, her voice smooth as silk, "the inheritance needs managing. I'll handle it, your situation isn't suited." Her pity masked control, and I, too broken to question, agreed. She'd overseen the will's execution, her smile ablaze as she promised to protect my share. But the statements told a different story. She'd siphoned it off, leaving me to fend with odd jobs while she planned her lavish wedding. The memory of her cold eyes, the way she dismissed my tears, fueled my anger. This was personal, a legacy stolen to erase me. Meanwhile, Linda's wedding day loomed, her control tightening like a vice. The estate buzzed with activity, florists adjusting cascades of white blooms, staff polishing crystal chandeliers, guests arriving in tailored elegance. She moved through it all, her lace gown a shimmering crown, directing with a precision that brooked no dissent. James, her fiancé, adjusted his dark suit, his charm dimmed by a growing unease. "Linda," he'd murmured that morning, "you've been secretive about the finances. Where's the extra funding coming from?" Her laugh was sharp, her reply evasive. "Family resources, darling. Don't worry." His suspicion lingered, a crack in her facade, but she dismissed it, her focus on the perfection of the day. Back in the city, Albert and I planned my return. His penthouse, a stark contrast to my former life, became our strategy room. We spread the evidence across a glass table, the forged letter, Grayson's confirmation of her rumors, the bank statements. "She can't hide this," Albert said, his voice low, authoritative. We rehearsed my revelations, his calm guiding my nerves. "Start with the letter," he advised, "then the inheritance, let the facts speak." His past rivalry with Linda, a detail he'd shared with a wry smile, added irony to our alliance. She'd tried to crush him, now he armed me against her. We mapped my entrance, bold, uninvited, the green gown a symbol of my rise. Albert's support was unwavering, his ring on my finger a quiet promise. My days grew tense. The clerical job demanded focus, but my mind raced with plans. The diner shifts, once a burden, now sharpened my resolve. Each tip saved, each ache endured, a step toward confrontation. Linda's obliviousness fueled me. She'd written to a friend, intercepted by Albert's contacts, boasting, "Rebecca's still a ghost, perfect for my day." Her arrogance blinded her to my transformation, her stolen legacy funding the very stage where I'd expose her. The night before the wedding, I stood before a mirror in Albert's penthouse. The green gown, his gift, lay across the bed, its fabric rich, its cut elegant, a stark contrast to the rags I'd worn. I traced its hem, the color a banner of my new identity. The evidence folder rested beside it, a weapon forged from her lies. Albert entered, his gaze approving. "You're ready," he said, squeezing my hand. "She won't see this coming." His words steadied me, but the weight of the past pressed in, Linda's manipulation, the stolen funds, the banishment. I donned the gown, its silk cool against my skin, a transformation completed. The mirror reflected not the sister she discarded, but a woman armed with truth. My decision crystallized. The wedding invitation, a formality she'd never meant me to accept, lay on the table. I'd attend, uninvited, the green gown a declaration, the evidence a sword. Linda's control would shatter, her legacy exposed as a theft built on my ruin. The thought carried me back to the hall. As I stood before her, Albert's hand a quiet strength, her shock deepened. The lace of her gown seemed to fade, the bouquet trembling as guest stares turned. "Rebecca," she whispered, her voice a crack. James's suspicion flickered, his hand tightening on her arm. The confrontation loomed, my resolve a fire she couldn't extinguish. The grand hall brimmed with the weight of my return, the green of my gown a defiant blaze against Linda's fragile lace, Albert Cruz's commanding presence a silent storm at my side. Her eyes, wide with dread, clutched the bouquet as if it could hold back the truth I wielded. The guests' whispers had softened, but as the wedding ceremony loomed, my resolve sharpened. The time to unravel her facade had come. The wedding began with a hush of reverence, the estate's chandeliers casting a golden glow over the assembled elite. Linda stood radiant at the altar, her lace gown shimmering with every deliberate step, a vision of control she'd sculpted from my ruin. James, her fiancé, flanked her in a tailored dark suit, his charm a perfect echo of her ambition, his smile wide as he took her hand. The guests, draped in silk and jewels, gazed in awestruck approval, their murmurs a symphony of admiration. Cascading white flowers framed the scene, crystal glinting like a crown, every detail a testament to the inheritance she'd stolen. The officiant's voice rose, the vows poised on Linda's lips, her world a polished mirror of her triumph. Then the double doors swung open. I stepped in, the green gown, Albert's gift, hugging my frame, its bold hue a declaration of my rise. Albert followed, his presence towering, his suit a shadow of authority that silenced the room. Gasps rippled through the crowd, heads turning as the music faltered. Linda's radiance cracked, her bouquet trembling in her grip, James's smile freezing mid-motion. The guests' eyes darted between us, their whispers a rising tide of shock. I moved forward, the evidence folder a weight in my hand, my heart pounding with the truth I'd carried from the city. "Linda," I said, my voice cutting through the silence, "this ends now." I pulled the forged letter from the folder, its edges worn from my grip. "This letter disowning me was your lie, forged to banish me, to justify your shame." The crowd stilled, eyes widening as I held it up, the false signature a scar of her deceit. "And Grayson and Company, the job you sabotaged with rumors of my instability? I have proof." I produced the firm's confirmation, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. The guests' murmurs grew, a mix of disbelief and curiosity, their gazes shifting to Linda. Her attempt to dismiss me faltered. "Rebecca, this is absurd," she snapped, her voice sharp but unsteady. "You're delusional, leave or I'll have you removed." She gestured to the security, but the guests hesitated, their eyes questioning. An older woman in the front row, a family friend, leaned forward. "Linda, is this true? The letter looks off." Others nodded, their trust in her wavering. James's hand on her arm tightened, his shock evident, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. "Linda," he murmured, his voice low, the rift between them widening. I pressed on, the hall a theater for her unraveling. "You painted me as unworthy, but it was you who couldn't bear my potential." The forged letter waved like a flag, the Grayson evidence a second blow. Linda's smile vanished, her lace gown seeming to dim under the scrutiny. She stepped forward, her voice rising. "This is a stunt, she's unstable, always has been." But the crowd's murmurs drowned her, their stares piercing her facade. A man in a gray suit, a business associate, whispered to his companion, "I heard those Grayson rumors. Odd they came from her circle." James's expression darkened, his hand dropping from her arm. "Linda, what is this?" he demanded, his tone edged with suspicion. She turned to him, her composure fracturing. "It's nothing, James, trust me," she pleaded, but his silence spoke volumes. The guests' questions grew. Did she forge it? What about the job? Their admiration turning to judgment. Linda's control slipped, her bouquet a fragile shield against the truth. Albert stood beside me, his gaze steady, a quiet strength that anchored me. I felt the weight of the final evidence, the bank statements proving her theft of my inheritance. The moment hung, the hall buzzing with anticipation. I drew the statements from the folder, their numbers stark against the page. "And this," I said, my voice firm, "is the inheritance you stole, my legacy funding this day." I held them high, the crowd's gasps a chorus of shock. Linda's face drained of color, her hands clutching the bouquet as if it could steady her. James stepped back, his eyes wide, the rift deepening. The guests' murmurs swelled, a wave of disbelief and outrage, the hall alive with the unraveling of her perfect lie. The confrontation had begun, but this was only the opening act. Linda's lips parted, but no defense came, her lace gown a wilted crown. The evidence, letter, sabotage, theft, lay bare, a mirror to her betrayal. Albert's hand rested lightly on my back, his support a silent vow. The guests' stares bore into her, their whispers a judgment she couldn't escape. I stood tall, the green gown a banner of my rise, the inheritance evidence a sword poised to strike. The hall buzzed, the facade crumbling, and I knew the next move was hers to dread. The grand hall thrummed with the chaos of my revelation, the green of my gown a blazing defiance against Linda's crumbling lace, Albert Cruz's unwavering presence a rock at my side. The inheritance evidence hung in the air, the bank statements a damning mirror to her theft, the guests' murmurs a rising storm. Her face, drained of color, gripped the bouquet as if it could anchor her faltering world. The primary climax was upon us, and the truth would no longer be silenced. The silence that followed my display of the bank statements was electric, the hall holding its breath as the weight of Linda's betrayal sank in. I stepped closer to the altar, the evidence folder a shield in my hand, my voice cutting through the tension. Linda kept me poor to shine brighter, I declared, my words steady and sharp, but her lies end here. The forged letter, the sabotaged interview, the stolen inheritance, they were a tapestry of deceit, and I unraveled it thread by thread. The crowd gasped, their eyes darting between me and Linda, the air thick with disbelief. Her bouquet trembled violently, the lace of her gown seeming to wilt under the scrutiny. James, her fiancé, stepped back, his dark suit rigid, his faith in her shaken. "Linda," he whispered, his voice a crack of doubt, his hand falling from her arm. The guests, including Aunt Margaret, a family friend who'd once doted on Linda, leaned forward, her expression hardening. "Is this true, Linda?" she asked, her tone laced with betrayal. Others joined, their murmurs swelling. The inheritance? The letter was fake. Their admiration turning to judgment. Linda's perfect day, built on my ruin, began to fracture. She tried to rally. "This is a fabrication," she snapped, her voice shrill, stepping toward me with a forced smile. "Rebecca's unstable, always has been. She's making this up for attention." But her words faltered, her eyes flickering with panic as the guest stares pierced her facade. A man in a gray suit, a business associate, shook his head. "I heard those Grayson rumors, too convenient to be chance." Aunt Margaret crossed her arms. "Linda, if you forged that letter, you've crossed a line." The crowd's support drained, their whispers a chorus of condemnation, her reputation teetering on the edge. Albert moved forward, his voice firm and resonant. "Your sister's strength outshines your cruelty," he said, his gaze locking with Linda's. The hall stilled, his authority silencing her protests. He stood beside me, a pillar of support, his past rivalry with her adding a bitter irony to his words. Linda's lips parted, but no defense came, her control slipped, her lace gown a tattered crown. James's shock deepened, his silence a chasm between them. "Linda, explain this," he demanded, his tone cold, the rift widening with each unanswered question. I pressed my advantage, the evidence a weapon in my hands. "You stole my inheritance to fund this," I said, holding up the bank statements. "You forged a letter to ban me, you spread lies to keep me down. This is your legacy, built on my suffering." The guests' gasps were a wave, their eyes accusing. Linda's protests weakened, her voice a whisper. "It wasn't like that. I had to protect the family name," she stammered, but the words rang hollow. Aunt Margaret turned away, her disapproval a public rebuke. Others followed, their murmurs a judgment she couldn't escape. The hall buzzed with outrage. A cousin in the back row muttered, "She disowned her own sister?" A woman in pearls nodded. "And the money, unbelievable." Linda's hand shook, the bouquet dropping petals to the floor, her lace gown a shroud of her unraveling image. James stepped further back, his face a mask of disillusionment. "I need the truth, Linda," he said, his voice low, the engagement a question mark. Her reputation crumbled, the guests turning backs a silent verdict. Albert's hand rested lightly on my shoulder, his support a quiet strength. I felt the weight of my journey, the rainy day with him, the clerical job, the evidence gathered, culminating here. I leaned toward Linda, my voice a whisper meant only for her. "You banned me to hide your shame. Now, I wear your defeat." Her eyes widened, a flicker of recognition and defeat, her protests dying in her throat. The hall's murmurs swelled, a storm of her own making, as I stepped back, the green gown a banner of my triumph. The confrontation had peaked, her world laid bare. The guests' stares bore into her, their whispers a relentless tide. James's silence was a wound, his trust in her shattered. Albert's firm stance beside me was a testament to my rise. Linda stood alone, her bouquet a broken relic, her lace gown a faded dream. The chapter of her dominance closed, and mine began anew. The grand hall echoed with the wreckage of my confrontation, the green of my gown a triumphant flare against Linda's shattered lace, Albert Cruz's steady presence a beacon at my side. Her whisper of defeat still lingered in the air, her bouquet a scattered ruin on the marble floor, the guests' murmurs a relentless tide of judgment. As the secondary climax unfolded, I turned from the altar, my hand slipping into Albert's, ready to leave the chaos behind and step into the life I'd claimed. We moved toward the double doors, the crowd parting like a sea before us, their whispers a fading storm. My fingers intertwined with Albert's, his grip warm and firm, a silent promise amid the uproar. The green gown swayed with each step, its silk a symbol of my rise, the evidence folder now tucked under my arm a testament to the truth that had toppled Linda's world. As we reached the threshold, Albert paused, his dark eyes meeting mine. "You turned their rejection into your strength," he said, his voice low but resonant. "I'm proud to stand with you." The words washed over me, affirming the transformation I'd fought for, a validation that healed the wounds of Linda's betrayal. I nodded, a smile breaking through, and we stepped into the cool evening air, leaving the hall's chaos behind. Inside, Linda's perfect day lay in ruins. James's anger erupted, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Linda, how could you?" he demanded, his dark suit taut with tension, his hand clenched at his side. "The inheritance, the lies, you've destroyed everything." She turned to him, her lace gown crumpled, her face a mask of desperation. "James, please, I did it for us, for the family name," she pleaded, but his eyes hardened, the rift widening. "I don't know who you are anymore," he said, stepping back, his consideration of leaving a silent threat. The guests closed in, their judgment a weight she couldn't bear. Aunt Margaret shook her head, her voice sharp. "You disgraced us, Linda." Others nodded, their whispers a chorus of condemnation. She stole from her own sister. The forgery was unforgivable. Linda's isolation grew, her control shattered, her reputation a tattered remnant on the floor. Outside, the estate's gravel crunched beneath our feet as Albert led me to his car, a sleek black vehicle that gleamed under the fading light. The cool air brushed my skin, a contrast to the hall's stifling tension, and I felt the weight of the past lift. I reflected on my journey, the rainy day with Albert, the clerical job that rebuilt me, the evidence that armed me. Linda's ban, once a wound, had been my liberation. Her rejection had pushed me into the city, into Albert's path, into a life she could never imagine. The stolen inheritance, the forged letter, the sabotaged interview, they'd been her chains, but I'd turned them into wings. The realization settled deep, a quiet triumph that Linda's cruelty had inadvertently paved my extraordinary rise. Inside the car, the driver pulled away, the estate shrinking in the rearview mirror. I glanced at Albert, his profile strong against the window, his hand still holding mine. "You gave me more than I dreamed," I said softly, and he smiled, squeezing my fingers. "You earned it, Rebecca. Your strength did this." The words echoed his earlier praise, reinforcing my new identity as Mrs. Cruz. The city lights began to glimmer in the distance, a beacon of the life ahead, and I felt a peace I'd never known. Back at the hall, Linda's isolation deepened. James paced, his anger a storm. "I need time," he muttered, his voice cold, his departure a possibility that hung heavy. She reached for him, but he turned away, joining the guests who now avoided her gaze. Aunt Margaret approached, her tone final. "You've lost my respect, Linda. This ends here." The crowd thinned, their judgment a silent exodus, leaving her alone amid the wilted flowers and scattered petals. Her lace gown, once a symbol of triumph, now clung to her like a shroud, her perfect day a memory crushed under the weight of her deceit. In the car, I leaned back, the city lights growing brighter as we descended from the estate's hill. My mind replayed the banishment, Linda's cold words, the forged letter thrust into my hands, the years of struggle. Each memory was a stepping stone, each hardship a lesson. The clerical job had taught me endurance, the diner shift's resilience, Albert's love a foundation. Linda's theft had funded her wedding, but it had also fueled my resolve, driving me to uncover her lies. Her ban had been my freedom, a push into a world where I found strength she could never comprehend. The driver navigated the streets, the skyline a constellation of possibility. I gazed out, the lights reflecting in my eyes, a mirror to the life I now embraced. Albert's ring glinted on my finger, a reminder of the proposal that had transformed me. "What's next?" he asked, his voice gentle, and I smiled. "A future," I replied, "built on my terms." The thought carried a quiet power, Linda's rejection had liberated me, her shame my victory. The hall's ruin faded, replaced by the city's promise, and I embraced it fully, ready to write the next chapter of my story. Linda, alone now, sank into a chair, the bouquet abandoned, her lace gown a faded relic. James's footsteps echoed as he left, his silence a final judgment. The guests' murmurs had died, their departure a verdict. Her isolation was complete, her perfect day a shattered dream, her legacy reduced to the lies she'd sown. The estate, once her kingdom, now stood as a hollow shell, its grandeur mocking her fall. In the car, the city lights filled the windows, a tapestry of hope and renewal. I turned to Albert, his hand still in mine, and felt the strength of my journey. Linda's ban had been the spark, Albert the flame, and I the fire that rose from the ashes. The past was behind me, the future ahead, and as we drove into the night, I gazed at the lights, embracing the life I'd claimed with every beat of my heart. The city lights glimmered beyond the penthouse windows, the green of my gown now a cherished memory against the elegance of my new life, Albert Cruz's steady presence a constant at my side. The grand hall's chaos had dissolved into the past, Linda's shattered lace and scattered bouquet a distant echo. As the resolution of my journey solidified, I stood in the glow of triumph, my hand in Albert's, ready to embrace the dawn I'd forged from her ruin. The penthouse overlooking the city was a world apart from the estate's opulence, a sleek sanctuary of glass and steel, its vast windows framing a skyline that sparkled with promise. Albert and I had settled into this luxurious life, his wealth a foundation I'd earned through resilience. The mornings brought coffee on the terrace, the evenings quiet dinners where we planned our future. My days, once filled with diner shifts and clerical drudgery, now held purpose, charity work, inspired by my past, and quiet moments with Albert, his ring a constant gleam on my finger. The transformation was complete, a triumph solidified by the life we built together. Back at the estate, Linda's wedding had been cancelled, her social standing destroyed. The news reached us through whispers. James had left, his departure a final blow, the guests' judgment a permanent scar. The hall, once adorned with cascading flowers, stood empty, the crystal chandeliers dimmed, a hollow shell of her ambition. Aunt Margaret's voice carried the tale. Linda's disgraced herself beyond repair, no one will touch her now. Her lace gown, abandoned in a corner, symbolized her fall, her reputation reduced to the lies she'd sown. The stolen inheritance, the forged letter, the sabotaged interview, they had unraveled her, leaving her isolated in the estate's fading grandeur. I narrated the lesson that had carried me through, my voice steady as I spoke to Albert one evening, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. Their opinion of your worth says everything about them and nothing about you, I said, the words a mantra born from Linda's rejection. It was a truth I'd learned in the rain-soaked streets, in the ache of odd jobs, in the moment I'd stood before her with evidence in hand. Her judgment had defined her envy, not my value, and that realization had set me free. Flashbacks wove through my thoughts, tying together my rise. I remembered the rainy day with Albert, his umbrella a first kindness, his proposal a turning point that lifted me from poverty to power. The clerical job, with its endless files and faint praise, had rebuilt my confidence, the diner shifts hardening my resolve. Each step, uncovering the forged letter, tracing the Grayson sabotage, finding the bank statements, had been a battle won, a thread in the tapestry of my strength. Contrastingly, Linda's fall played out in my mind, her manipulation after our parents' death, her smug banishment, her theft funding a day that crumbled under truth. Her envy had been her undoing, her control a house of cards I'd toppled. Albert listened, his hand warm in mine, his smile a quiet pride. "You've turned every wound into a victory," he said, echoing his words from the hall. The memory of that night, my whisper to Linda, "You banned me to hide your shame. Now, I wear your defeat," flashed vividly. Her shock, the guests' turning backs, James's departure, they were the fruits of her own sowing. My rise had been her mirror, reflecting the worth she'd denied, and now I stood above it all. We moved to the terrace, the city a constellation below us. The air was crisp, the lights a promise of what lay ahead. "What's our next step?" Albert asked, his voice gentle but eager. I leaned against the railing, the green gown's memory a symbol of my journey, now replaced by the elegance of my new wardrobe. "A foundation," I replied, "to help others rise from struggle, like I did." His eyes lit up, and we began to plan, charities to support, a legacy to build, a future where my worth shone undimmed. The idea grew, a vision of empowerment born from my past, proving that no attempt to suppress me could hold. Flashbacks continued to surface. The moment I donned the green gown, the rehearsal with Albert, the confrontation's peak. Each memory was a stepping stone, each hardship a lesson. Linda's ban had been the spark, her theft the fuel, but my resilience had been the fire. Her fall, isolated in the estate, her wedding a cancelled dream, contrasted sharply with my ascent. The city lights mirrored my transformation, a beacon of the life I'd claimed. I thought of her last, alone with her guilt, her lace a faded relic, while I stood here, hand in hand with Albert, my future a canvas of possibility. We sat on the terrace, sketching plans on a notepad, funds for education, support for the struggling, a name to honor my journey. Cruise Resilience, Albert suggested, and I nodded, the title resonating. The past, Linda's envy, my poverty, faded into a lesson learned. My worth, I realized, had always been mine to define, not hers to diminish. The city hummed below, a symphony of renewal, and I embraced it fully, my hand in Albert's, our future a testament to my rise above every attempt to suppress it. Linda's estate loomed in my mind's eye, its silence a tomb for her ambitions. The cancelled wedding, James's departure, the guests' rejection, they were her legacy now, a cautionary tale of envy's cost. I felt no malice, only a quiet victory. My journey had turned her rejection into strength, her shame into my triumph. The lights of the city, bright and endless, reflected in my eyes, a new dawn where my worth rose unshackled, proven by the life I now lived with Albert.
Thank you for watching this story to the end, my beautiful family and friends. If you enjoyed this story, you'll love the next one. It's wilder and more exciting than you can imagine. So check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.